I think classical Christian education is the single biggest cultural win that we've made as a church. And it would be tragic if we've made all these sacrifices to build this thing only to then hand it over to the state. Weirdly, by funding higher ed, we've made it way more expensive. You're building your rec center, your lazy river, you're building all these things that have nothing to do with education. And then not only do they have nothing to do with education, you actually discover that they compete with your education. And your students aren't spending any time in the classroom. They're spending time in this like kind of Disneyland life that they're funding with student loans for 4 years.
Your organization is known worldwide, and we certainly appreciate every facet that you do.
I do believe in what you're doing because I've seen it in my family.
I'm so excited about all the things that, Robert, you guys are doing with Classical Conversations. It's been a huge blessing for our family.
Grateful for the work at Classical Conversations. You're a leader and you have been in this movement for a long time.
We love Classical Conversations.
I do feel like I have a debt of gratitude to you, your family, all of CC for just the fruit that has come from CC.
I appreciate all that you guys do, both through this wonderful podcast and also through Classical Conversations, which I am convinced is the best education resource out there. Thank you very much for all that you do for the cause of Christ and for our families and for our children. Really, really appreciate it.
Hey, and welcome to another informative episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, I'm so excited to have a friend and a higher education guru, Dr. Ben Merkle. He's president of New St. Andrews College, as well as a senior fellow of theology. He has a doctorate and master's from Oxford University, so you know he's classically educated. And he is a teaching elder at Christ Church in Moscow, preaches at their downtown services. He's author of The White Horse King in 2009 and Defending the Trinity and the Reformed Palatinate in Oxford University Press in 2015. And he and his wife, Rebecca, have 5 children and a growing generation of grandchildren. So a rich man indeed. Dr. Merkle, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Privileged to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you for writing the basically the introduction or the foreword for my book, Woke and Weaponized. And one of the reasons I wanted to reach out to you was that New St. Andrews does not take federal student loan dollars, and that's really unique in the collegiate space. Maybe a dozen, I don't know, more or less colleges that do that. Some of them led by as you told me, maybe presidents who don't necessarily agree with that decision, but are stuck to the bylaws of that institution's founding documents. So, yeah, I just wanted, when you became president of New St. Andrews, like, did that surprise you? Was that just part of the gig? Like, tell me a little bit about that and how you felt.
Yeah, so I had been teaching at NSA for a while before becoming president, so I knew that we didn't do that, and I knew it was something that my predecessor, our founding president, he talked about. It was something that was a conviction that the board had, and I was fine with it. And it's just one of the things that was unique about us and everything. So I was happy to wear that as a badge of honor of some sort. But it wasn't until I got into this position and spent some time looking at spending time at other colleges, other college presidents, talking with them, and then starting to realize the significance of that conviction and how important it was. So what was initially kind of an inherited conviction is now something I would say is a pretty deep conviction for me.
I know college presidents, I'm sure, have gatherings where they get together and talk about issues and the direction of higher ed. As you've been a part of those conversations, have you seen headaches that maybe other universities, especially Christian universities, are having to deal with, spend tuition dollars on because they're taking this money that you get to just be thankful for, you don't have to worry about?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really funny, but a lot of times when I tell other presidents that we don't take any of the money, at first they're a little bit perplexed. Why wouldn't you take free money? Free, right? It's supposed to be free. Yeah. Why wouldn't you take that? And then you see them sit there and start to do the little mental calculation of all of the departments in their administration that they wouldn't have to have anymore if they didn't take the federal money. And they start going, like it almost might break even in some situations, because you have to do so much administrative work to account for and track and report on and keep everything in compliance and everything in order to keep that federal money coming. And it is a total headache, just administratively, on top of countless other ways that I think it compromises your mission.
Yeah, so like during the Trump administration, everyone's happy, but during like Biden or Obama, what does the federal government like? Obviously, they're not just giving this money out willy nilly, or they are almost giving this money out willy nilly. But there's a lot of things that they can make you do. So, how have you seen just institutions taking this money have to wrestle with maybe their core values versus taking this money, and do they make compromises? Do they bend the knee? Do they try to work around it? Or I'm guessing it's some of all of the above.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know. Do you mind if I just go back a little bit to sort of give
Sure.
a bit of a historical perspective on this? Because a
Yeah.
lot of this, the federal money really goes back to the GI Bill is really kind of where it starts, where you start having government money towards going towards colleges. And originally, it's kind of interesting. After World War I, the veterans had been promised this bonus for their fight in World War I, and the government wasn't paying up on it. And in 1933, there was this famous, it was kind of like their January 6th. They had a 40 or 50,000 World War I veterans march on Washington, D.C. in protest over not getting their bonus. This is in 1933. You've got Hoover is president. And in order to push out this protest, he calls in, actually General MacArthur comes in with tanks, tear gas, bayonets, and you're using these on your own World War I veterans. It was like one of the most least popular kind of political move you could have made. And that's the year of the election. Hoover loses the election really badly, having bungled the whole bonus army. He loses to FDR. And FDR is the president who takes us through World War II and then hands it off to Truman. And basically FDR won his presidency on Hoover's, bad move during the bonus army. So FDR makes sure that when the veterans from World War II come back, they are going to feel the gratitude of this grateful nation. And so he puts together this GI Bill, and it is it's student loans, grants, and also home loans. And that like the explosion of suburbia is made possible by all of these home loans. But then you have this flooding of the college campuses by World War II vets. I think it was something like twice the number of people they had expected to take the student loans or the grants and whatnot, and showing up on college campuses with their GI Bill. It was like double the number they had projected, or maybe even more of that. So they flood the campuses. And so now the U.S. government is sending all this money to colleges to pay these guys tuition. And after all the money goes, all of a sudden they say, now hang on, if we're paying for the product, don't we have some say in the quality of the product? Yeah. And so now all these colleges are taking these GI Bills, but they have to then start reporting to the government on how the money is spent and whatnot. And in one sense, it's a reasonable expectation. If I'm paying the money, then I ought to be able to dictate what goes on there. But it changes the customer of the education from the student to the government. And then when you have the student loans and the Pell Grants then added after the GI Bill, it just gets more layered on. All this reporting goes on top of that and just builds up again and again until now, at this point, even your most private colleges, their number one form of revenue is coming from federal and state governments. And if it's a private school, it's probably all federal governments through Pell Grants, student loans, and federal grants and whatnot. That's their primary income. And so the government is the main customer, and the customer's always right. So the government gets to say what you're going to do, and they really steer how these colleges are put together.
Yeah, so I was talking to Rachel Jensen on one of these School Choice Week episodes, and about how Arizona first they introduced school choice with the kids with disabilities, and who doesn't want a kid with a disability to get a good education? And then they go, okay, well, what about the poor kids? Who doesn't want poor kids to have an education? And then, okay, we're going to get the poor kids. And so we almost see the same thing with the federal grants, where you had the GI Bill first. And of course, who
Yeah.
doesn't want the military? You earned it, as part of what you did. But then the strings get attached. And then, of course, then 20 years or 30 years later, then there's the Pell Grants, and then where we are today. And it's going a lot quicker. So, and just an interesting parallel there. So yeah. So now that we've got the history behind it, and if you go read the book Woke and Weaponized, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't have any facts like in front of me, but we do know that many communists had kind of implemented or integrated themselves into FDR's circle. If they didn't maybe think about, okay, about 80% of the communist resources were put into education, according to one of their spies that came out. So it wouldn't be surprised if they said, okay, if we can get these Christian colleges to take the money, eventually they'll have to bend the knee to the government. And as long as we can take control of the government, then we can make them do what we want, which I guess includes making girls' bathrooms available to men. So I think
Yeah.
maybe some schools. So what were some of those things you saw during the Biden years? Because those seem to be a little bit worse than Obama, of just crazy things they're asking these schools taking the student loans to do. And I know that they would have been asking you directly, so it's just things you heard.
Right. It definitely started under Obama. You had this series of, they call them the Dear Colleague letters, that would go out, and basically, if you're it's a fun. I'm not a lawyer, so please don't think you're getting a legal education here. But basically, the Pell Grants and student loans all fall under Title IV. Those are Title IV monies, and Title IV money was subject to Title IX, which is the you cannot put any barrier between between women and their education that would somehow make it more difficult for them to get it than for men. They really take Title IX and they started expanding it in all kinds of different crazy ways. If there was a sexual harassment case, they said, well, that's happened because you're a woman, so that's actually a Title IX variation, or violation. Once it's Title IX, then also it becomes this federal thing that is taken out of your normal court system, and they can set up a whole new court system where you change what is the burden of proof, what is the nature of the witnesses. Does the guy that's accused get to actually face the person who's accusing him? Does he even get to know what he's being accused of? And you started to have all these crazy kangaroo courts on college campuses because all of they took Title IV money, so they have to deploy Title IX in this new way that it's being interpreted. Your sexual identity, if you were confused as to whether you were a guy or a girl and wanted to use the opposite sex's bathroom, that became a Title IX issue because somehow gender was tied up in it. And so it starts getting applied in all these crazy different ways. I saw Christian colleges. I remember in this one meeting, it's all we're college presidents, all from Christian colleges, and one Christian college president is describing how her campus had this issue with significant sexual abuse or harassment or something like that. So she was really pleased with this intricate, year-long education they did to teach their students how to receive consent for fornication. For them, it's just, she's just teaching them this bureaucratic way to hook up, and it's just fornication, but it was because it was this like, I don't know, because it was put in this like bureaucratic sort of, we've got this problem and we know the students are going to do this, so we have to help them to do it in the right way. And it became this sort of like wink wink nudge nudge, this is just what we have to do. And they're all sort of priding themselves on being sort of super sophisticated because they know how to help their students to fornicate. And of course they wouldn't say it that way, but that was exactly what was going on. And it was all because of this Title IX and Title IV and all the money used that way. There's countless little examples like that where it's just these Christian campuses that are supposed to be, you're supposed to be this unique and distinct and you're supposed to be a light and, doing something distinct and truthful. And we're just trying to look like all of these other campuses, and all of the terrible educational fads and whatnot that's going on all these other campuses. It's just completely taking over our Christian colleges.
Yeah, you were probably a more mature young man than I was, but Dave Chappelle did a very hilarious skit on on these forms he would have young women fill out before they would fornicate, so that you couldn't get sued. So hopefully you didn't watch those Comedy Central skits, and you were busy doing more important things like having children while I was off running around having too much fun. But
I was at college earlier, I think, but
yeah, yeah, or you were probably still at Oxford, maybe. I don't know. I only barely escaped through with a engineering degree. So, yeah. So one of the things, so we see like just compromise happening, and instead of almost like fighting back and saying no, as Christians we're not going to compromise, you see these presidents who are in theory in charge of the hearts and minds of the next generation of Christian students trying to find sophisticated ways around looking like they're complying, or complying but not in the way the government quite would want them to comply if they could have their druthers.
and that's the real tragedy, I think, is that college, I think college is unique in that I strongly believe college is not for everyone. I think that colleges shouldn't be going around saying everybody needs to have a college education. We're doing something very unique and distinct here. It's not for everybody, but I do think we have a really distinct role to play for those who are going to be our future cultural leaders. We can be a forge, a furnace where young students who have disproportionate potential for cultural leadership should come here, and let's teach them what distinctive leadership looks like. And I think that that's really the role that colleges have, is to grab those particularly uniquely gifted leaders and get them ready to really launch and step forward in leadership. So leadership is all wrapped up in everything I'm describing. It's all wrapped up in our mission. And what I see colleges doing, these institutions that are uniquely set up to be teaching leadership, and because of this federal money, they have become, all they do is they try to figure out ways to comply. They're just compliance machines. And the way you rise up in excellence in like college administration is by being the most compliant. Like if you can comply better and quicker than anybody else, faster, higher compliance, then you rise all the way to the top. A friend, joked that like in order to become a college president, there's a unique surgery you have to have where they remove your backbone. That's the only way you can get into that job. But a lot of higher ed leadership, it really is not about leadership, because leadership is frequently about like defying. It's about like stepping out, distinguishing. Like in the business world, you make big steps forward when you're able to see that ground that nobody else is taking, and you differentiate yourself like that. Higher ed is very about compliance. You differentiate, you die, and or at least it gets pretty hairy. Watch COVID was such a perfect moment for that. Like how many of our institutions, like everybody's falling all over each other, trying to figure out how we can like double mask, triple mask, and everything you can do to look like you were the most compliant person out there. So I think that's one thing that it's done that's been a real problem. The other thing, it's not so much ideological, but I think it's financial, and that is federal money obviously inflates the cost of higher ed. Our tuition is skyrocketing, and it's because of federal money has inflated the market. And anytime, I think it was William Bennett, the Secretary of Education with Reagan, who has the Bennett hypothesis that, whenever you add money to Pell Grants or student loans, when you put money in to fund colleges, you will see a reciprocal bump in tuition that gobbles up that in the next like 18 months or so. And so weirdly, by funding higher ed, we've made it way more expensive. And it's this like self-perpetuating cycle, because it's like higher ed is so expensive, so I guess we've got to fund the Pell Grants and the student loans, otherwise nobody will be able to go to school. And then it goes up more, and they're like, oh no, we have to fund them some more. And the more and more you do that, what's really weird is the worse the quality of the education gets. It actually like you throw more money on it, and they get distracted from the actual work of giving an education, and it's ruining the education.
Wokeandweaponized.com. Go there right now and get my new book. It outlines the history of American education and why the current public school system can't be reformed. It must be replaced. And this is a well-documented book. Thank you, Dr. Benjamin Merkle, for writing the foreword. And as Sean Ryan said, if you're a parent, read this book. Go to wokeandweaponized.com today. Yeah, so higher ed is like super expensive now. But what about you all? You guys don't take the student loan, so how could anyone afford to go to your institution? You must charge $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year. What's it cost now to go to New St. Andrews?
I think we're right
Roughly.
at 8. I think this 18,600, I think, is our current tuition. 18,600. I need to go and look
A
at the
semester?
webpage.
A quarter?
No, for the year. That's for the whole
for
year.
the year?
Yes. Yeah, that's for the whole
How do you
year.
afford all those compliance officers?
Yeah, I know. If you don't have to hire the ridiculous admin for all of that. And another thing is, like, I mean, if you just focus on actually giving a quality education, it's remarkable how, like, that's affordable. You can do that. This is why I say that the more you fund it, the more you ruin the education, is because when you start funding it, you're not hiring more teachers. You're building your rec center, your lazy river, you're building all these things that have nothing to do with education. And then not only do they have nothing to do with education, you actually discover that they compete with your education. And your students aren't spending any time in the classroom. They're spending time in this like kind of Disneyland life that they're funding with student loans for 4 years. It's not, you strip all that away and you say, let's just give them really good classes. And suddenly you find out the quality of education spikes and the cost drops.
Nice. So what do you see? Like, talk a little bit about the financing of higher education, because you see these outrageous numbers, but like, how much of those outrageous numbers, like how many people are actually paying it? And do colleges play games so that they can maximize their student loan funding, even though that they don't necessarily need all of it?
So if you're a state college, then you have you have what you charge in tuition plus whatever you get funded by your state, which is pretty considerable. It's almost like a 50-50 kind of split. It depends on the state. Some states fund high, some states fund low. But I think Wyoming has massive state government funding, I think because of the oil there. And then as you go into the Northeast America, the New England area, state funding is actually quite low because there's a high expectation that people are going to pay their own tuition. So anyhow, at the state colleges, it's half parents paying tuition and half the state funding it. Now, this half where the parents are paying it, turns out, a third of that is Pell Grants and another third of that is student loans. So what parents are actually paying is this small portion, and state and federal government are covering, 80% of it or 90% of it. If you go to private colleges, that's where I am, you don't have that state contribution. So tuition has to go up in order to make up for that state contribution not being there. But what private colleges do is they don't just go up to there, they keep going and they come up with some ridiculous price, $55,000, $60,000 tuition for a year. And that's the sticker price. And then when you apply, you get accepted, and they'll say, and then they'll look at you and kind of judge, what they think you can pay. And let's say you can't pay very much, then they're going to say, congratulations, we've awarded you a $40,000 scholarship, and because you're such an amazing student, and you are feeling like, this is amazing. This college is giving me $40,000. The state college, so you're going to pay $20,000. Your state college also, you're going to pay $20,000. But you feel like this is such a better deal because this $40,000 that they're going to give you. Well, that $40,000 doesn't exist anywhere. It's just they discount it, is what it's called, where they just knock a bunch off the sticker
like
price.
Belks.
So it's like what's that?
It's like shopping at Belks. You always save $300. Like I spent $70 and saved $300. I got to go back tomorrow.
Yeah, and that sweater has never sold for $300 or whatever it was. Yeah, so it's a way to make you feel important because you got accepted to this really exclusive college, and the way you know it's really exclusive is it costs $60,000, and this exclusive college is investing $40,000 in you. It doesn't exist, but you feel like it does, and so you'll go and you'll sign up. Now, let's say you apply to that school and you get accepted, but they and because you're going to submit all your financial records and everything, they know kind of where you are. They realize you are totally able to pay for this. So your scholarship, you got like a $3,000 scholarship. Your $60,000 went down to $57,000, and you are basically carrying the difference that this other guy couldn't afford to pay. And so that's how they kind of even it all out. They set the tuition high so they can get the most that they can out of the rich kids, and then they will discount down to everybody else. And if you can't make that, then you can make it up with Pell Grants and student loans.
Wild. But Christian colleges, they wouldn't do that because that seems a little shady.
I think Christian colleges are probably the worst offenders on that. It's pretty rampant throughout most private colleges. You get colleges like we don't play a game. I don't think Patrick Henry plays that game.
No,
I don't think
so.
Hillsdale doesn't need to do that. So there are some good schools out there that don't mess around like that, but there's a bunch that do.
Just as a disclaimer, if we didn't mention one, it doesn't mean that they don't. It just means be wary, parents. So one of the things that like on the foreword that you wrote, over the past 40 years, the classical Christian education movement, both in institutional schools and in the homeschooling families, have adopted the model, has easily been the single biggest cultural victory for the American evangelical church. So, talk a little bit about that. Why do you think that the classical Christian education has been such a victory? Like how is that different than maybe the Christian education that came before that?
Yeah, so the classical model and this returning to the classical model, that was at the foundation of launching this whole classical Christian education movement, and it has had such powerful impact and such great success that I've seen. First of all, I think it's really interesting watching colleges reinvent themselves in order to recruit to the classical pipeline. I mean, this was kind of like, I lived through this, so it was sort of interesting because when NSA was founded, we were founded, I'll go back historically for a moment. My wife, Becca, was in the very first kindergarten class of Logos School, which was at the founding of the whole classical ed movement. So that was like the first classical school, and she was in the kindergarten class that year. She graduated Logos. She then came to New St. Andrews, and so 94 was when NSA was founded, and that was my wife coming into it. So from that little story, you suddenly see how NSA, we were founded with the idea of we want to be the successors to K-12 classical education. We want to be the place where all these kids go. So we were sitting in that little sweet spot for years, and kids were coming from all over, and NSA was growing. And then really in the from 2012 to 2016 or so, you really saw higher ed suddenly turn and look at classical and realize this is the future. This is where all the best and the brightest are going to come from. These are the kids we want. And you saw schools all over reinvent themselves to be like, we are the next step. If you have a classical education, we are the place you ought to go. And so we were this like little college that we were in this sweet spot where like they're all coming here. And then out of nowhere, suddenly we're facing people with, 10, 20, $30 million marketing budgets and trying to compete with that. So it was a really interesting moment. We figured all of that out, but I just say like during that time, like higher ed was realizing the future is classical. And it's funny to me, I was at a thing last year, a little conference where it's all a bunch of presidents and we're going around, everybody's supposed to describe their school. And it was hilarious to me, like easily 30 presidents in the room and easily 2 out of 3, everybody was trying to say how they are the real heart of classical education. Like we are the ones who are doing whatever. And it was just funny. So it's shaken up the education space. But what I see now is the way classical has jumped from classical Christian to just classical. And you see the charter schools and all of that. And just across America, everybody is trying to somehow position themselves as classical. We are classical. I just see that everywhere. I don't see any other field in which the evangelical church has built something and everybody else has tried to own it. I just don't see that anywhere other than classical Christian education. It's the single biggest cultural win. Not just because everybody wants it, but because I think it actually was super successful and it's turning out these incredible graduates who are going on to do good things.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's funny. I was at Clemson University, has a great books program, and that's where I went to college. So definitely nothing Christian about it, but it's actually probably maybe one of the better public schools, universities. But they had like 20 public universities coming in to learn about their great books program to see if they could start one at their universities or what it took to start one. And one of the guys from Ohio State raised his hand and asked, I was on a panel, asked me, he's like, well, we're a secular university, so like, will the Christian parents really send themselves to us? And I was like, unfortunately, yes. But I thought it was good that he recognized it. I wish Christian parents would be more thoughtful about where they send their kids. But I mean, honestly, like different people are different roles, and I think it's would still be attractive to some people to know that you care about the classics. He laughed, but I thought it was a very insightful question. And as you just mentioned, there are more charter schools or secular classical schools. And, I want everyone to get a classical education. I think, that's going to be better. But you run the risk of, like C.S. Lewis said, just making a smarter devil. Like, what do you see? Like, if you have a parent and they have a quote unquote good classical charter school near them, and they have a classical Christian school next to them, like what would you say would be kind of the different experience that their students gonna get, and how would that maybe change how they view life long term?
I think that, I think it's a huge difference. I think classical without Christian is a empty shell. Like the gospel is why we built the culture that we built. And I think particularly scripture commands us as parents, we're commanded to give our children a Christian education, to raise our children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. When I see like the classical charter school movement and things like that, there's a piece of me like I want to not be a perfectionist. I'm not a perfectionist, and I'm all for strategies that take time. I don't mind an incrementalist kind of strategy, but it's really easy to use the incrementalist strategy to basically not do anything. It can be a massive compromise. And so let's say you have a woke government school and there's next door is a charter school with a classical curriculum that is not explicitly Christian, but it's Christ friendly, then yes, I can see how getting that competition, pulling kids from that low government school into this school where they can be in a place where their mind is framed in such a way that it's friendly to the gospel. I see that as a plus, and I'm not gonna say that's terrible. My problem is that when that classical charter school comes in, I suspect that instead of taking from the public school, the low public school, into the classical charter school, is that what you get is the parents who are paying to send their kids to a classical Christian school or making the sacrifice to homeschool them with a classical Christian education realize, hey, now I've got this option. It's not quite as good, but it's free. And that rather than pulling these kids from the public school into this, we're actually pulling kids out of a Christian education into a secular education. And that's where I'm cynical and concerned about some of these moves. Is that I think, as I said, I think classical Christian education is the single biggest cultural win that we've made as a church, and it would be tragic if we've made all these sacrifices to build this thing only to then hand it over to the state and give up all of everything that we just built. There's a reason the state wants it. Like we built the aircraft carriers, and that's why they want these.
Yeah, talking to Alex Newman, my co-author, I think it's in the book, but I'm not quite sure which chapter, and it's definitely in an interview that I've done with him. Is because he worked for a Christian private school, and he's done the research. And I'm not gonna. This number is not accurate, precise. It's in the ballpark, but something like if a charter school opens up next to a Christian school, the Christian school has like a 25 or 30% more likelihood chance of closing down than they would if it had never been there. So I think your suspicion is probably proven if someone wanted to go out there and do the research that it's not actually pulling kids out of the woke public school. It's pulling kids, it's pulling kids that are getting a much stronger and Christ-centered education. Yeah, so you also mentioned here about how the infusion of federal money into college revenue streams is always explained as intending to make the colleges more affordable. You talked about William Bennett. But the thing that I want to talk about is the infusion of government money removes colleges from the price signal of the free market, as tuition setting is now calculated to capture the most federal assistance rather than trying to find the real value. So that took like a long time, right, in the college. Like you guys kind of incremental. I was there when it was happening kind of at a rapid rate. My out-of-state tuition at Clemson University my freshman year was the same as my in-state tuition my senior year because I had become a South Carolina resident. To think about how much it had gone up in that short, like literally in-state tuition went up like 9x, I think, in 4 years.
Wow.
But like what lessons should the K-12 administrators learn? Because my heart is kind of what you just said, is like we've worked so hard to build these independent institutions just to see us handed over to Caesar. And I said in a speech once, like, look, I love you all. You are working so hard to make these institutions great for your students, and you're going to wake up, it's not going to be tomorrow, but 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and realize all your hard work was for naught because your institution is now just, a woke garbage pail because the government took over so much of it that you just, you've wasted all your time and now you're realizing that it was a mistake, and I don't want you to make that mistake. So, what should have Christian colleges maybe done 10, 15, 20 years ago that could have prevented them to do now? Or what would your warning be to K through 12 administrators who may be thinking that, yeah, I can get all this money and pay my teachers more and get a new basketball hoop and things like that with these
Right.
these universal school choice
Yeah, I
monies?
mean, sometimes it's really easy to have like your own existence and growth to be the actual mission that you serve. Like, we exist in order to exist, and also to exist maybe even some more. Where you lose, like, what are we trying to be? And it's just about trying to to exist. And so when that happens, then you're just in it for the money. Like, you really are just trying to find. I see the exact same thing, not so much on the government money, but also just with fundraising with donors. A lot of times people come and they'll say, "Yeah, I want to give money to your school, but I want to see, I want to see this new program on AI. I'll give you 250 grand if you have this new program in AI." And then colleges will quickly, all right, we'll come up with this new program in AI so we can get the money. And it's like, what's happening is the money is the point, like, rather than your mission being the point, your mission becomes to get money. And so you'll conform your institution in whatever way you can to please whoever has the most zeros on their check. And you're no longer about being what you're supposed to be. So I think the big thing is you have to define in a clear and compelling way, what are we really trying to do? And then you generate funding revenue, streams of revenue that want to support that mission. You have, you like, one of the things at NSA is we're pretty spunky, I suppose, on the social media side. Like, on the media front, there's
you don't have a $20 million budget, so you gotta make spunky videos.
Yeah, but yeah, that's part of it. But also part of it is just like, I want people who get who we are and who are drawn to it to be the ones who come and donate and things like that. Somebody who just wants your run-of-the-mill Christian Bible college or whatever probably be a little bit put off by us because we're pretty aggressive. But I want I want donors. I want donors who like actually want to fund our mission, rather than to have a school that's trying to figure out what the donors want. So the more clear you are with your mission, then funding comes to that. So I think that's one big thing, is they just need to be clear on their mission. The other is just, America and the way you in your book, you do a lot on, at least the front end, on Marxism, and how Marxism coming into America and particularly hitting us in the world of education upended things. And there's just something so Marxist about the way people in institutions of education think, where we think in terms of like, I'm just owed this, and this needs to be funded by the government, and our existence somehow, by being a teacher, I'm just owed money and funding and all these things, rather than having to actually work for it. I really love at NSA not having any of those streams of revenue, and it's tense. It's when you wake up and it's like, today we have to earn our money. Like, we have to go out and we have to make sure that we earn it, and we might not have it tomorrow if we don't keep actually executing on our vision. And so there's something just really, like I said, it's kind of ulcer inducing, but it's also, I think, really good for your business to have to earn it every single day and not have it guaranteed tomorrow. And I think that being in that spot has ruined our colleges. They just think that they're owed this money and that they don't have to actually perform or execute to get it.
I think the Bible says something about you can't serve God and money, but I'm not sure exactly if that's in there or not. Somebody go look that up for me.
God and mammon, and also if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. You're not guaranteed dinner. You have to actually earn it.
Yep, entitlement programs breed entitlement. That's why they're called entitlement programs, and of course, the student loans are one of theirs. So you conclude your foreword with just saying, if we want to continue gaining ground in the world of education, it is imperative that we not hand control of what we have built at the K-12 level over to a secular authority, and what we must understand that funding is authority. So I really appreciated it, and thank you for going out on a limb and doing that for me and for this book. So yeah, I'll
Absolutely.
give you a final plug. I mean, we've talked a lot about the NSA values, and of course, we send a lot of students from Classical Conversations there. And I'm trying to get my social media team to be a little bit more spunky too, but having difficulty. But yeah, tell us a little bit about NSA, how students could learn about it, and if you just got some maybe final words of wisdom about these school choice bills or laws that are out there.
Yeah, NSA. I mean, we're our primary product is our 4-year degree, our bachelor's degree. We're a classical liberal arts Christian, robustly Christian liberal arts program. Most of our students come from some sort of classical education or another. A lot from Classical Conversations, which they do very well here. Our mission is to graduate leaders who shape culture under the lordship of Jesus Christ, and we're pretty serious about that. They're like, we really are trying to create cultural leaders, and we're giving them an education for disproportionate impact on the culture, and that we're very serious about. We want it to be under the lordship of Jesus Christ. It's a very faithful community here. Our grads go on to all kinds of different things. We're particularly good at sending kids on to law and politics, onto media, onto entrepreneurial business, ministry, teachers. They kind of go all over the place, really. There's not one particular path, but it's a really solid. This is the education that, like, the West, that built the West. From the medieval era on, this is the education that cultural leaders got. That's what we're trying to replicate. We're in a really interesting moment. We're definitely working to grow. So if you got young kids with talent and potential, send them our way. Or if you want to fund an institution, like, I really intend for NSA to be the premier liberal arts college of Christian America over the next 100 years. We want to be the ones that are graduating the leaders. And if you're interested in funding that, come look at NSA. We're in a growth period, and so buildings and things like that, it's an intense time. And not taking federal money means we have quite a lot of need for people who want to come by and fund those sorts of things. I think that reflecting back on the conversation, I think the founding principles at NSA are. There's just a few things that, like I was saying at the beginning, like, I inherited these principles, and at first it was just like, oh, this is what I'm told are my talking points. But I've really come to see that these are, like, crucial to our DNA. The no federal money has been a big one. No, the fact that we just have one undergraduate degree in liberal arts and not a whole bunch of different specialized, I have come to appreciate that in such profound ways, because we have twisted what education is supposed to be. And I don't think we understand what education is really about. And that one liberal arts degree is a huge step towards recovering and understanding what education really is. The Christ-centeredness, I just think that our institutions are embarrassed of their Christianity, and we need to be bold for Christ and the claims he makes for all of life, all of culture. And it's fun because I see across the U.S. college students being infantilized and turned into this failure to launch generation. And I see at NSA, these kids, we meet them at the door like they're adults. We tell them, you're an adult, we're going to treat you like an adult. And it's crazy watching them graduate as just really mature adults. And it's a beautiful thing. And they're so well set up disproportionately, in comparison to what I see coming out of most other college campuses. I'm really blessed to be a part of it.
Well, I can echo that. Every single graduate I've seen has been amazing. So I'm proud to be friends with many of them. So thank you so much for all you're doing at New St. Andrews, Dr. Ben Merkle. Thanks for writing the foreword. Go to wokenweaponized.com. Go get your copy today. And be sure to check out all the podcasts this week. We're talking about school choice and how you cannot serve mammon and God, and why we need to keep our educational independence if we want to have a Christian future here in the U.S. So until next time, God bless, and be sure to share this episode with a friend and subscribe on YouTube.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortins. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation. and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.